Hello, everybody. So we've made it to the last week of the class, getting very near the end. Kind of like last week, when we started last week, we hit all of our course objectives. So just kind of doing some odds and ends, things that'll be useful. The look at joints, we ran out of time the other day. They have different names and everything. I noticed the assignment I put hinge joint, which is I carry over from when that assignment was in for Unity. Uh, calls the same thing pin joints. So the names might change a little, but we basically have three types of ways to connect rigid bodies. So we'll look at those. Then I put text to speech on here. That can be fairly useful. The Linux computer, you're on Linux, right? No, but text to speech has to come from the operating system, which can be a problem on Linux machines because Linux operating systems don't have voices built in. On Linux and Windows machines, you'll usually have at least two voices to work with, which can be kind of nice. Well, I guess there are voices that you can put on Linux machines, but they're bad. If anybody's ever used eSpeak, it's really bad. So if you know your game's probably going to be played on somebody who's going to be playing on Windows or Mac, text to speech gives a nice way to get vocals in there. Maybe look at visual shaders if we have time left. But, at this point in the semester, I think what's probably more important is time to work on projects, right? So we'll wrap up around somewhere between 2:05 and 2:15. And kind of like last week, and if you want to meet with your groups, you can do that. Or everybody can just kind of go off their own head out for the day. And as usual, I'll be sitting around just by the computer ready to answer questions until our class time ends. Well, actually, a little bit earlier today, only until about 3:30 today, because then I have to go. Then I have to go do some stuff. But for most of the class, I'll just be sitting on my computer waiting. Just hop on the Zoom call in case anybody has any questions. The first thing here, let's look at text to speech real quick because that can be kind of useful. If you just have a Windows machine and on a Mac OS, anything running Mac OS, you're gonna have at least two voices, male and female voice. So it can be a nice little touch for NPCs to have it spoken, but it's the same restriction we always encounter with text to speech that Linux just doesn't have any good text to speech modules built in. It really comes back to the open source thing. So really good voice models that there haven't been any really good voice models donate their voice recordings to Linux to use, is where that came from. I'm starting a new project. I really need merch in it. Talking. What I had in mind was something simple. We'll just put that default sprite on there and just put some basic movements on it, and then have the voice say things like moving left or moving right or whichever direction we're going. Because that'll be enough to and I'm just gonna put on a node 2D and then let's put a sprite in that. Hey Keith, right before the class started, a question came up. He was having trouble with his Zoom at home, and he disabled IP6, and it started working perfectly. You have thoughts on why?
I've used both at home and I haven't had a problem.
Okay, yeah,
It was only a home period. It's fine. Works.
probably something on your router then. Yeah,
Yeah, it could be in your router.
I figured you might know what that was. Okay, so first script, we'll just do some basic stuff. I don't know if we need any setup function. I'm just gonna have it always put it there. I'm gonna move a little bit, so if input is action pressed. Position and sorry, position, the X component of our position, and then move it up to the left back line. Position correct. And then we'll just change the lights. All that should seem fairly straightforward, familiar things that we've seen a few times. Speaking with movement, I've got I think 3 or 4 of the billiards games graded. I'll get those in before long. I've watched everybody's videos and read through everybody's code, but I've just started the final pass where I actually play the game and read the code a couple times while playing the game last night. So I've got through like 3 or 4 of them. Looks really good. This is one thing I did for when I was getting that ready, making sure it was or like the report. I just used the position to move it, and then the force was only used to actually hit the ball. It looked like some people were using applying forces to do the movement and stuff, which works, but it's when we want the controlled movement, we can mix and match more controlled movement and stuff. Multiple ways to do it. I saw some really interesting ideas on the one that I read through. But I should have all those graded soon. All right, so this is just a basic thing, like moving left and right, up and down. But it seems like enough to cover everything. So I need to create a voice, and to do that, we're gonna work with this object display server that has all of the text to speech stuff built in. And first thing we have to do is get all of the voices available. The TTS get voices language, and then the abbreviation for whatever language you speak, right? In English, so EN, and then that actually returns an array or disk for 2 voices. On Windows machine, the male voice should be 0, and the female voice will be 1. Let's start with the male voice. Okay, yeah, and then once we have that, then we can just start talking. And TTS or text to speech, and then our main one's going to be the speak function. There you go. going left. And then which voice do we want to stay back? So we can load multiple voices in. I think there's two on a Windows machine. There's two that are active. There's others that are on there, like 23, I think. But you have to go into registry and actually activate them manually. But I don't want to get into that today. So we'll just go with two voices. You can have lots of voices. Just remember, as far as games, it's going to depend on the voices on the player's computer. So, whoops. Kind of loaded that in. It brings in all the voices. There's two that'll be active on both Windows and Apple. And then more, I guess, that we can pay for, but they're in the registry, so you can go in and turn them on manually. Your player might not do that. So I'm going to put something like that in each one. The first one's to see a little important note about these. What's this? This is down. Here, face in, go. Whoops. So it should, whenever we start moving in a direction, it should tell us which direction we're moving in, is the idea there. But a little thing we have to address. Whoops. Oh, the settings we have to change. It's really small on the screen. It says it can't do anything. Index 0 is out of bounds, which that error message isn't really helpful, right? It's like, well, this should have at least the first item in it. But we have to go in project settings. Make sure that advanced settings is on under audio and general. The general section under audio is a checkbox that we're giving it permission to use text to speech. And notice that if you turn advanced settings off, you won't even see that. Make sure you have advanced settings turned on, audio, then general, and hit that checkbox. Which we've seen that message before. It's one of the changes that we have to restart because the game engine has to get permission from the operating system to access the voices that are in there. Yeah. So start getting left.
Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going left. Going
But then when I
left.
go to sleep, it's still going. Oh,
Going left. Going
we have to
going
make some adjustments.
Going left.
It'll do that.
Going left.
Push down. We'll say.
Going left.
Okay.
Going.
What we really need to do is to tell it to stop, and that's just display server dot TTS underscore stop. But you have to work in a little bit of logic from how a good time. I'm going to set up a Boolean. Let's make it true first, so that we can speak. So then, if speaking is true, then we'll do that and set speaking to false afterwards. And when that's false, what I like to do is just give it a time, um, give it a little bit of, wait time. And then, come on, which a lot of people do this in the project. There's the await function. We always have access to a await function or sleep, it's different names. But personally, I'd like to, I find it's better to avoid those. Yeah, it's white space. There we go. Not at the bottom of the screen. I think it's better to avoid those because that stops your program. Right? So if you say, well, let's go with say 60 hertz, 60 frames per second. You're set for 60 frames per second, just to know that number. So you're getting about 17 milliseconds per frame. But if you use the await function, your game stops. So if you do await for half a second, everything in the game stops. So it's usually a little bit better form to set timers and then have it come out after a timer. Then you're not bringing your game to a complete stop. If you need to do it for, well, like in this case, long enough for the voice to say the words, that's going to be very noticeable in your animations and stuff. So whenever that variable gets set to false, I'm going to create a new timer. I'll just call it timer. It's timer. Timer got new. Have we looked at timers in here? Because I started typing this, it seems like it's been a minute since I've done it. So maybe we haven't. So create a new timer. And then when we set it up, there's a couple things we have to do. First thing is we need to connect. So there's different things we can do on the timer with the timer, and there's something tagged. So like time off is when it gets to the end of the timer. There's another word for like every tick, every second or something. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head though. I almost always use time offs. And that's just at the end of the timer, we want to call some function. I don't know, I'm gonna call it up next. Then we need to come down and create that function. Function up next. Which I'll get back to doing that, come back and do that in a moment. Timer.wait time is how long is it gonna wait for? I don't know, let's try half a second. Maybe half a second is long enough for the voice to say something. Might have to try a couple things on the numbers. We want to set the one-shot property. If it's true, the timer runs one time and timer just runs one time and then it calls whatever the timeout function is. If you set that to false, it comes down, calls the timeout function, and then starts again. So just the looping timer. This only needs to happen once. Then we add it to our scene. And once it's part of the scene, we can just call the start function. And then this is just a temporary one, so it'll kind of clean itself out. Good have scope there. It doesn't have global scope, so we don't have to worry about removing it later. So it's just going to count down for half a second, and then after that half a second, we'll say display server TTS stop. So it'll just stop talking, and we'll set that variable back to true. So fairly basic logic, but I wasn't wanting an example to show you that. So we do have to work in some logic to make sure it starts talking at the right time and it stops talking. In this case, like when we held down left and kept moving left, it just kept doing that over and over. And there's another 5 or 6 seconds afterwards that it kept talking.
Going right. Going right. Going down. Going down. Going down.
Half second might be more. We switch that up to a second and a half. Probably you'd actually use that in a game, right? Most likely give it to an NPC, and then when you walk up to the NPC, they talk instead of word appearing on the screen.
Going left. Going right. Going down. Going up.
So fairly easy to use, and it can add a lot of flair. Nice little flair, because again, Windows and Apple machines both have nice voices. It's the one their assistant uses. Very few people use the voice on the Windows machine, but for Apple users, I think most people know Siri's voice. And then one's going to be the female voice.
Going left. Going right. Going down. Going up.
And you'll also probably notice there's a delay there as well. There's some delay from the Zoom call. I'm not sure exactly how much. I turned off the speakers locally so that I can't don't have a weird echo like last time we did something with the shared screen.
Going left.
So a slight delay, but in the situations where we've used that, that's acceptable. Right, standard one's going to be an NPC shopkeeper. So you walk in there and then they can hear their voice talking. So you should have, you can usually count on your users having 2 voices on their machine. Some might have more, but you either have to pay for the more or go into like the registry on Windows and manually turn them on. I think on Apple's you actually, they're not installed until you buy them from the store. But a useful little thing that can make games seem kind of nice. Without actually hiring people to record audio samples and all of that. It is still a generated voice, so if you have the time and ability, maybe money to actually hire a voice model to read the part, that's obviously going to be a lot better, but voice models usually aren't cheap. All right, I'm starting another project and look at the joints, the connecting pieces, joints and hinges, things like that. They have different names in every game. Let's call this joints. Every game engine gives them different names. That's why that one instruction said use a hinge joint. And if anybody tried to look up hinge joint, you know, and notice that it doesn't have it. Hinge joint is what Unity calls it. Calls the same thing with hinge joint. There's a couple different ones. What do we need here? I'll do a 2D one. 3D follows suit. We just have the one more axis that they'll do the same thing. And it relates to physics bodies, so we need 2 physics bodies. I'm going to put in a static body. Give it a shape. Or graphics. And a shape. So we have all of that. Include a shape 2D. For the sprite, I'm just going to drag the Godot icon over there. Just use that. And then we'll have a moving piece and we'll connect them together. So the moving piece is obviously gonna be the rigid body. Oh, I've got to set up the shape on this one. Add in a rectangle shape. Rigid body is also gonna be Sprite. And add in a we've seen many times here on this one. And then can move this over here. Somewhere near this, so, think of it as different ways that we can connect these things. So up here at the root, I'm gonna add in, I'm just gonna search for joint, we'll see all three of them. So we have a spring joint. Just like a spring, we'll set up properties and then like how stiff is the spring or, how hard is it to stretch out, how tight is it, like how much does it wanna pull back, all that stuff. A groove joint, that's for things sliding next to each other, or a pin joint. Let's start with a pin joint. If I come in, you'll see it's just this little bitty dot. So that's like the spot that things rotate around. So I'm gonna move it like right to the bottom of this. And then our movable shape is gonna kind of rotate around that. I'll put it over here to the side. Oh wait, I forgot to assign it. Actually, it's just gonna fall. One more step still. Hence the error message. When the pin joint's selected, you'll notice over here, it needs to know which two nodes it's connecting. So I'll set node A to be the static body and node B to be the rigid body. Or you can click assign and the list is there. I struck it from those. Now when it runs, gravity should start pulling that down, but it's restricted to the other one. So I think most people will drop that from the group project. But that's the like how you would set up a door over top, and then you apply force to get the door to open or swing or can also be nice for tires because we have this property here, softness. That's like how tight it is it. Yeah, softness isn't a good label. When we turn this up, it can be nice for like tires on a car. You put the pin joint right in the middle of the tire, and if softness is all the way down, then it's like really tight, it won't move at all. But if you turn the softness up, there's a little bit of wiggle room. So as that tire bounces on other things in the world, it kind of bounces around and looks a little bit more like a suspension system. I don't know if this pendulum one's gonna see much of the softness. Yes, it does seem to affect this, but it gives it a little bit of wiggle room. How tightly is it being held to that thing? But we need something more interesting than just the little icon there spinning around. I should have renamed all that up. So you can see that basically you set up two of your bodies if they're moving both two rigid bodies, maybe one static body, one rigid body, as long as one can move, and then that's how they move relative to each other. Let's do a groove joint. There's a couple more settings on that one. It's this. I'm gonna right click and duplicate that setting. All through. Groove, I can delete this pin joint. And add the groove joint. If we zoom in on this, you can see there's basically a little line. It has a point that it starts at, and then a line going off of it. So kind of like the name implies, this is a little groove that our stuff can slide along it. Let's do this. Let's put it here next to this one. If you all haven't seen that, it's really, really useful. You can right click and move your nodes around. So the node that's selected, I just want to put it here. And I'm going to rotate it off at an angle. That's probably a good angle. And you'll see these two properties up at the top, specific for the groove joint section. How long is it? And what's the initial offset? So I'm going to make that quite a bit longer. But still stop on the scene still. And then instead of the offset, I'm just gonna, oops. Select the movable body and put it kind of right on there. The offset is like how far away is the thing moving from the again, we just assigned the two nodes to it. When it runs, it'll gravity's gonna pull it down, and it kind of slides down that thing, tumbles around because of other things happening. Offset. You can try kind of play around with some of the different settings. What would that do? Not quite doing what I was expecting it to do. Maybe if I put it like right on there. So that it doesn't fall down first. Actually. Here. It's still tumbling around. When I was getting ready, it slid without rotating it. So that gives you the idea. It just, that's the only movement that's allowed, is just sliding down that area. Turn the offset down. Hangs to it a little bit better, and then, yeah. It didn't do the turn upside down thing when I was getting ready, so. Not really sure why I did that, but that's the basic idea. When you need something that slides, and do little combinations of them, things like that. But controlling the physics a little bit better. Is that might have helped with the pool game, because it's really, really hard to get the pool, that cue perfectly lined up with the spot on the ball that's not gonna make it turn off in some direction. A couple people included a zoom feature, and I had to zoom way in on the, like, really close to the end of the pool cue to get in the exact right spot so that it wasn't just slightly off. It's very sensitive. That might have helped for that, and then you only have that one direction it can move in. Different settings. Oh, I'm gonna duplicate that again. Go right to the original and duplicate that, and make a spring joint. But yeah, in general, there's a lot of settings there'll be a lot of settings like normal. But there's a couple that we're just gonna use over and over again for the particular place. And these are basically the 3 ways we have to connect things. So a spring is like it sounds, a spring to connect them. I'll come over here and try to right click here. Move it over here. It gives a little bit of graphic representation and increase the length a little. So maybe it's gonna start, oops. Under 56 long. And then the rest length, if it sets to 0, if it's set to 0, it goes with whatever the length is, whatever you set the starting length at. But otherwise, that's like the length the spring wants to be. So right now 156, and the rest length's 11, so it's going to try to pull those things closer together and get to that shorter value. Once we assign it. Oops, which, yeah, you can just click the button. Things don't get named properly. You can see the spring's trying to pull it back up. Mass, it plays a big role here. So if we went to the rigid body, quite a bit. Notice the spring can't quite pull it back up, can't pull it up the same. Reset that. Yeah, the stiffness is how yeah, how tight is the spring? And see if we turn it all the way up. The spring's gonna pull really hard. All the way, and obviously I'll turn it way down, and the spring's barely gonna pull it all. I set the mass back to 1. So it, yeah, kind of balances. Yeah, so turn it way down, the spring can't pull it back to the wrist weight. Where is it? We have that up the left. So there it is. It's trying to pull it up. Hanging off with a little bit to the side. If we turn, so reset damping. Damping is like the resistance to moving. How much does it resist being pulled up? So I'll turn damping way down. So you can see so all the way down, there's like no resistance, but the spring is still fairly soft. It's bouncing around. It's not a very rigid spring. There's no resistance to it changing and oscillating. To turn it way up and it barely moves at all, so, maybe think of it as the type of material the spring's made of. It's a nice thin metal that moves easily. That'd be very low dampening, or is it, a big spring like we have underneath in the suspension on a car where it's like a half-inch diameter, piece of steel. It takes a lot to get that moving. Damping might be work for that. And then softness, I guess the car suspension is kind of like that. It takes a lot to get that steel spring moving under a car for big heavy things. But over time, it's going to wear out and it takes less and less and less. And then when you have old vehicles, they tend to bounce a lot more because that's the material is still the same, but it's kind of worn out. So yeah, think of it that way. As the spring gets worn out, that's the softness property. It can't quite pull the same as it did when it was new. It bounces a little different. But that's basically the three ways we have to connect things. They have different names in all of our game engines, but usually you can tell which one's which. The names are obvious. They're just not standardized everywhere. Any questions about the joints? It adds nice restrictions to the physics in your game. You have more control over how they interact. We'll look at something here. Just because it shows up a lot. Visual scripting. This is more of the industry standard. Well, that boots up. I did have another note, something to keep in mind is game engines can be used to make other types of software, right? Games aren't the only things we can make on here. Previously, when I taught this class, the very first thing we did, like week one, we would make little regular apps like you'd see in programming classes using the HUD and all that UI interface stuff, and use that to make a GUI. Or if you need just something more interesting, I often use game engines for putting together animation videos, which get all the things done, because animation and sound is trivial in a game engine, super easy. They're set up to make audio and animations really, really easy. So if that's what you need, it can be a lot easier than trying to piece things together in other software. So there's going to be lots of changes and stuff, or you need control over it. Can also make really, really nice presentations in game engines. As long as it's a reasonable length presentation. Before there does hit a length of the presentation, right? You wouldn't want to do a slide deck that's to accompany a 45-minute talk. That would take a long, long time to game engine. But if it's something that you would do 4 or 5 slides in a PowerPoint or something, you make something that looks a lot better in a game engine really quickly. Just a thought to have. I'm gonna add a note here. So visual scripting. Currently, Godot does not have a visual scripting for like our script tab when we're making a script. Ones you all have seen. We have all these functions, right? This ready function is already built in. And then we have all those other functions that we would call. Right, so if we were in physics process, might do apply central force, which is only going to work on a rigid body. We have a rotate function. Then we pass in some number. In fact, it's called rotate. But anything on that list, right? Trying to get one that wouldn't throw an error message. But all of those built-in things, we get to them by just typing the name here. That's not the only way we could do it. We could also do a similar thing with low-code solutions where we have graphics that correspond to the functions the same way the keywords do. So I'm gonna add just a little mesh in here. Right now, Godot does not have Godot does not have one for the scripts right now because they haven't used to have one, and somebody invented a much better one. But the much better one's not going to be backward compatible, so they took it out of 4, and then at some point in the future, maybe even before we get 5, but at least when we get to 5, Godot 5, the next major overhaul, they're going to put it back in, assuming that that's long enough that they don't have to worry about backward compatibility between the games anymore. But an alternative way to write the code, we do have it for shaders. So I'm just gonna put a shader on here, material, a new shader material. And when we go to create our new shader, there's that first box says type. If you change that to a visual shader, you can kind of see what the sort of thing we have. Let's call it shader. So the thing with the nodes and we connect them, we saw it with the shaders in Blender. This is kind of the standard for how game engines write their code and their shaders. So there's an output node, and we can create other nodes by dragging out from there. Just probably want to color. I'm going to call them. We can type in something. 123 V8 0. Set our stuff up that way. Come out from the metallic one. And set up how our and has to be running with math. I was just randomly up. Apparently I can't use course mode. Oh, that's I guess the one I pulled there only works with the thing. But our we build up the materials, and instead of typing in like we did when we were looking at shaders, we connect these nodes, and it gets very spaghetti looking very quickly. But that's sort of the standard in how games are made. Images of it. engine. Okay, yeah, so like this, accidentally download that. I didn't mean to download it, I thought I was clicking on, open a new tab. Yeah, so you can see that one's set up as a shader, and kind of how you write your code. Some people may have seen that in, Unity, used to be called Bolt. I think it's just visual scripting now. What's this one? Probably blurry when I zoom in. Yeah, another material one. The big thing with Unreal 5 is the shaders are much nicer. But you can see how we're just connecting those different nodes. And essentially, it's just like with our script, we have those keywords, but it's just a graphic that goes along with them. And there's a big advantage whenever you have your script that way, because when it's running, you can watch the data flow through that visualization. They do go to the same compiler, so you end up, it ended up being no different than typing your code in a text file. But just be aware of those things and maybe spend a little bit of time playing around with them, see how they work. Blender has a really good setup that you can start getting familiar with it there. Because if you're planning on doing a lot of game development, you will see quite a bit of that. Oh, where's the button? There it is. Oh, sorry, I didn't see something in the chat. Okay, sorry, I did not see that come up, Jenna, when we were talking about the await function earlier. Yeah, so await is sleep. It stops your game where it's at, and it can make big changes. Oh yeah, lots of people use it. That's just my personal preference. I've hit issues, so my personal preference is to never, things like await and sleep and all of that. I never use those functions because I don't ever want to tell a program to stop until it gets to the very end. I'm sorry, I had the controls hidden on my screen, so I didn't see that. Well, it depends on where you use it. Because if you use it in your main loop, right, the physics function, physics process, then the function that is pausing is the physics process function. That's what I was referring to. So, yeah, if that makes sense. It's but yeah, that's really just more of a personal coding style. Is there's ways that we can get the same effect without ever telling the computer to sleep or delay or any of those, but they're always available. If you want to use them, they work. Let's see. 5 till. Okay, that's probably a good time. About an hour class. Because this time of the semester, time to work on projects is probably a little more important, right? Do y'all want to meet with your group members here today? Anybody? No. I can go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and if your group doesn't want to meet, y'all can head out for today. I'm going to be sitting around until about 3:30. I know that's a little bit earlier than our class usually ends, but I have to leave campus around 3:30. So from between now and then, I'm just going to be sitting by the computer waiting to hop on a Zoom call if anybody needs any help. Anything, just reach out. Otherwise, try to use this time productively. We're getting very near the end, and everything needs to be turned in. So there's a couple things due this coming Sunday, but any past due work as well. I never accept anything after that final deadline, which is 11:59 PM Sunday night. So the 11th? Yeah. That's when the semester officially ends, the date that was set years ago. So I never accept anything after that. So please use our time productively here and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll remind you a couple more times between now and then. But make sure you get everything submitted to me before 11:59 PM on Sunday night. Otherwise, I'll see y'all on Wednesday. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the breakout rooms in case anybody wants to talk to the group, but if your group's not meeting, you can head on out.